The flood bell rang once. Its iron notes struck the wet cliffs and vanished beneath the river's roar. Rowan Pike stopped on the trail. Far below, Vale Crossing Mill stood over the swollen water, its wheel turning hard in the spring runoff. A flood bell was never rung once. One peal meant a hand had reached the rope and lost it. Then a woman screamed, the sound breaking off sharply. Rowan dropped the mule's lead. Stay. He left the trail and started down the slope. Inside the mill, Miriam Vale tasted blood where Oren had driven her cheek against the floorboards. The main wheel thundered below her, every turn shaking the planks. She knew its rhythm better than most voices, and beneath it heard something worse, water rising against the lower braces. Oren twisted her right arm behind her back and forced her shoulder toward the timber frame beside the wheel shaft. Hold still, he growled. Miriam planted both boots and shoved backward with all the strength earned from years of lifting flour sacks and hauling gate chains. Oren staggered half a step, then cursed and slammed his forearm across the back of her neck. At the ledger table, Wade Vale gathered the spilled pages of a transfer agreement, with the frantic care of a priest saving scripture from a fire. "You are making this uglier than it needs to be," he said. Miriam turned enough to see Wade's neat gray coat and ink-stained fingers. His smooth voice had always tried to make lies sound respectable. "You brought Oren to force my signature," she said. "How pretty did you expect it to be?" Wade's mouth tightened. "We came to keep this place in the family. This place is in the family. Our father's family." The distinction landed exactly as he meant it to. Her half-brothers had left years before Thomas fell ill. Miriam stayed, kept the accounts, cleared winter ice, and sat beside their father until his final breath. 3 months after his will gave her the mill, they came home smiling. Wade flattened the agreement against the table. "Blackstone Silver is offering more money than you will see in 10 lifetimes. You can take your share and buy a proper house in Mercy Ford. And when Blackstone closes the Farmers Channel, they will manage the water as they see fit. They'll turn it north to their ore works." Wade glanced toward Oren. That glance told her more than the contract had. Miriam had found the document beneath Wade's spare shirt. It transferred the mill, the bridge, and permanent control of the headgate to Blackstone. 16 farms depended on that water. Wade lifted a pen. "Sign." "No." Oren forced her toward the frame. Rawhide looped around her wrist. The drive belt hissed less than 3 feet away, fast enough to maim her. Wade stepped around the wrecked table leg Miriam had kicked loose during the struggle. "You think Father left you this place because he trusted you. He left it because you were here and he was dying. He left it because I knew how to run it. You know how to count sacks. I know the north gate is fouled by the sound of its chain. I know the river will crest before midnight. And I know Judge Bell did not place that seal." Wade's composure slipped. Oren's grip tightened until pain shot through her shoulder. "Put her hand on the paper," Wade said. Oren dragged her away from the frame. Miriam let her knees buckle. He swore and bent to lift her. She drove the back of her head into his mouth. Bone struck teeth. Oren reeled, and Miriam tore one arm free. She swept the ink bottle from the table, shattering it across the agreement. Black ink spread over the signatures. Wade made a sound of pure panic. "You stupid!" Miriam seized the 3rd page and dropped as Oren caught her braid. With 1 free second, she shoved the paper through a split between the floor planks. Then Oren hauled her backward. Her dress tore at the shoulder. His forearm struck her ribs and emptied her lungs. Wade snatched up the remaining pages. "Where did you put it?" Miriam tried to answer and could not draw enough air. Oren forced her against the frame again and wound the rawhide around both wrists. "Where?" She looked past him. The flood bell rope hung from a ceiling pulley near the gear platform. It was 6 feet away, too far for her hands. Not for her boot. Miriam kicked the loose table leg. It skidded across the floor, struck the rope, and dragged it down. The bell above the roof gave one tremendous peal. Wade spun toward it. Miriam hooked the rope with her heel and pulled again, but Wade drew his knife and slashed through the hemp. The severed end snapped upward through the pulley. He stared at her. "You just made this worse." "No," she managed. "I made it louder." Oren seized the back of her neck and shoved her down. Her knee struck the floor. The moving drive belt hissed close to her face. Wade crouched with the pen. "You will sign what remains. Then you will tell us where you hid the third page. And after that?" Neither man answered. Miriam looked from Wade's polished boots to Oren's bloodied mouth. She understood. They meant to let the river destroy the mill and call her death an accident. Terror moved through her, but something steadier remained beneath it. The mill carried water to 16 farms below the gorge. Her father had taught her that holding the headgate meant holding those lives in trust. Wade pressed the pen between her fingers. Miriam closed her fist around it and snapped the shaft. Oren jerked her arm higher. Her scream tore through the mill. On the slope above the river, Rowan heard the second cry and moved faster. The bridge lay in view of every mill window, so Rowan descended through wet spruce toward the tail race. 3 horses stood near the building. Yellow lamplight showed through a partly open loading door, and a man's shout carried above the water. He checked the revolver at his hip and left it holstered. A shot inside might strike iron, or the woman he meant to help. He left the weapon where it was. He followed the tail race to a service platform and found the auxiliary brake lever wired open. No careful miller would do that in floodwater. Rowan cut the wire and pulled the brake. Inside, Oren had taken the broken pen from Miriam's hand and replaced it with another. Wade held the contract on a flour barrel because the table was no longer usable. "Your name," he said. "Nothing else." Miriam's fingers numbed under the rawhide as every vibration traveled into her bones. She stared at the blurred contract. Then the floor changed beneath her. Not stopped. Changed. The wheel's rhythm missed one beat. Miriam lifted her head. A mill did not hesitate on its own. The drive belt sagged, snapped taut, and slowed. Oren glanced toward the complaining gears. "What is that?" Miriam listened. The auxiliary brake was taking hold. Someone was outside. Hope came before she trusted it. She shifted one foot toward the slackening belt. Wade moved to the window. "Go see." Oren released one of Miriam's arms from the frame, keeping the other bound, and reached for the iron bar leaning beside the grain chute. The wheel groaned toward stillness. The river still battered the pilings, but without the machinery's thunder, the click of the loading door carried clearly. A tall man stepped inside. Rain ran from his dark coat. A scar crossed his jaw. His gaze moved from Miriam's bindings to her bruised cheek, then to Oren's iron bar. "Cut her loose," he said. Wade recovered first. "You are trespassing on private property." The stranger looked at Miriam. "Is it his property?" "No." Her voice came rough, but it carried. Wade reached inside his coat. The stranger's eyes shifted to him. "Keep that hand where I can see it." Wade stopped. Oren did not. He charged with the iron bar lifted over one shoulder. The stranger slipped aside. The bar smashed the flour barrel. He caught Oren's wrist and drove him into the grain chute, but Oren elbowed free. Wade drew a small revolver. Miriam saw it before the stranger did. "Left!" The stranger dropped. Wade fired. The bullet tore through a flour sack. Before Wade fired again, Miriam hooked the slack drive belt with her boot and kicked it toward him. The broad leather loop whipped around Wade's ankle. He fell hard, the revolver skidding beneath the ledger cabinet. Oren raised the iron bar again. Miriam wrapped both legs around the sagging belt and pulled. It caught Oren behind the knees and swept his feet away. The stranger knocked the bar aside and forced Oren face down. Miriam hauled the belt backward until it trapped Oren's boots against the frame. "Rope," the stranger said. "Behind the meal chest." He found it without looking away from Oren. Wade scrambled toward the cabinet. Miriam shouted, "Gun!" The stranger threw the coil into Wade's face, then crossed the floor and forced him down before he reached the hidden revolver. "Stay down," the stranger said. Wade stared up at him, breathing fast. "You have no notion who you are interfering with." No, the man said. But I know what I walked into. He bound Wade with rope and secured Oren with the meal hoist's chain, ignoring every curse until both men were fixed to separate posts. Only then did he turn toward Miriam. She remained tied to the wheel frame. The fight had lasted less than 2 minutes, but her body did not believe it was over. Her hands were numb, her heart painful against her ribs. The stranger stopped several feet away. "May I come closer?" The question unsettled her. Yes. He approached slowly and crouched beside the frame. Pale gray eyes, patched wool, elk-hide gloves. He looked like a man accustomed to cold distances. He examined the rawhide without touching her skin. "I need to cut this. The blade will pass near your wrist. I understand. Can you feel your fingers?" Barely. He slid the flat of his knife beneath the binding and cut it. Miriam's arms dropped, and returning blood brought a sharp rush of pain. The stranger caught himself before reaching for her. "Do you want support?" Her trembling knees answered before pride could. "Yes." He offered his forearm instead of taking hers. Miriam used it to stand. He remained steady until she had her balance, then released her. "My name is Rowan Pike," he said. "Miriam Vale, this is my mill." "So I gathered." Wade laughed bitterly. "You have made an enemy of men who can bury you in this gorge." Miriam turned toward him. Her fear had not vanished. It had changed shape. She bent beside the split floorboards and drew out the hidden third page, wrinkled but intact. Wade went still. Rowan noticed. Miriam unfolded the page beside the others. Blackstone's seal and Judge Amos Bell's signature appeared at the bottom. The forgery was nearly perfect. Judge Bell's final stroke should have hooked upward because of an old finger injury. This one curved down. The notary seal also carried the wrong ring of stars. Rowan picked up a second sheet from the floor. It was not part of the transfer. It was a hand-drawn map of the gorge, showing the mill, the bridge, the farmer's channel, and the upper timber dam. Beside the dam, someone had written 3 words in pencil. Pins loosened. Crest midnight. A deep vibration moved through the building, not from the wheel, but from the river, striking the pilings. "What does that mean?" Rowan asked. Miriam stared at the notation. For the first time since he had entered, the color left her face. "It means my brothers did not come here only to steal the mill." She put one hand on the table to steady herself. "They came to make certain there was no mill left to steal back." Rowan turned from the penciled warning toward Wade. "Who is expected here before midnight?" Wade stared at the map. Oren answered for him. "Nobody you can stop." Rowan crouched near Wade's post. "A name. Deke Sorrell," Wade said at last. 5 men with him." Miriam knew the name. Blackstone's security chief had broken a miners' strike near Silver Run. 3 witnesses against the company had disappeared afterward. "What are they coming to collect?" she asked. "The transfer. The one you failed to get." Wade glanced toward the river windows. Rowan saw it. What else? Rain struck the roof. Beneath them, the stopped wheel groaned as water pressed against its paddles. Miriam touched the mark beside the upper dam. The pins. Wade's shoulders sank. Oren pulled at his chain. "Shut your mouth. You think Sorrell means to leave us alive?" Wade snapped. "He said there could be no witnesses once the mill went down." Miriam flattened the map. The timber dam 1/2 mile upstream held the spring runoff until the farmer's channel could take it safely. 3 iron pins locked its braces. If Blackstone's men had loosened them, the rising river would finish the work. The mill would take the first blow. The bridge would follow. Then the flood would reach 16 farms and the eastern edge of Mercy Ford. When were the pins loosened? Before we came. The regulator clock showed 10 minutes past 9. Less than 3 hours. Rowan stood. "We take the ridge path and warn the town. By the time we reach it, the crest will be here. Then we leave now. And who opens the diversion gate?" She pointed to a second channel on the map. "My father cut a spillway into the west ravine. If I open it before the dam breaks, it may draw enough water away to save the lower valley." "May? The gate has not been fully raised in 12 years. And if it fails? The mill comes apart around the controls." Rowan's jaw tightened. That is a wager. It is the only one that does not stake other people's homes. Miriam saw the lower valley in her mind. Hannah Cole's orchard, the Bellamy children's red roof, old Mr. Reese's cattle pens. Those families had trusted Thomas Vale with their water. After his death, they had trusted her, some willingly and some because the will gave them no choice. The headgate was not only property, it was a promise. I am staying. Rowan looked from her bruised face to the map. Tell me what must be done. The answer caught her off guard. You believe me? I believe you know this river. Trust offered without taking command from her felt unfamiliar. Miriam folded the transfer pages into the oilskin ledger pouch and tucked it beneath her bodice. First, we restart the wheel at half speed. If it remains locked, the river will tear off the paddles. Rowan reached for the brake. Not yet. The lower clutch must be released first. He stopped. Show me. They worked from the foundation upward. Miriam disengaged the grainstones while Rowan held the brake against the river's force. At her signal, he eased it forward. The shaft turned with a deep shudder. The familiar vibration returned beneath her boots. Too much strain on the western bearing. She adjusted the grease cup until the grinding softened. Orrin laughed from his post. Father should have left this place to sons. Miriam kept her hand on the bearing. He left it to the child who stayed long enough to learn it. Rowan inspected Orrin's restraint. He can work that pin loose. Together they moved him to the stone support beside the loading door. Rowan controlled his shoulders while Miriam used the hoist line to keep him off balance. She drove a second pin through the chain and flattened it with a hammer. You trust iron more than knots, Rowan said. I trust what I can inspect. Something close to a smile touched his face. The flood bell rope had vanished into the roof pulley. Rowan climbed through the hatch while Miriam fed him a replacement line. He secured it with a spare trace hook, then descended soaked through, one arm held too carefully against his side. You are hurt, she said. So are you. That was not my question. Bruised ribs. She pointed to a grain chest. Sit. There is work. There will be less of it if you can still breathe. Miriam bound his ribs with clean flour cloth. Her wrists trembled, but she kept the pressure even. You knew one bell meant trouble, she said. A warning continues until danger passes. And if it stops, someone stopped it. His voice had gone distant. She tied the cloth. You heard one stop before. Rowan looked toward the turning wheel. My younger brother was caught beneath a snow shelf. We had a line between us. I felt 2 pulls, then nothing. I dug until a second slide drove me off. Was it your fault? I was leading. That was not what I asked. After a moment he said, no, but I was the one who came back. Miriam understood enough not to call survival a blessing. Tonight, do not decide for me, because you once lost someone who followed you. His eyes met hers. I will not. And I will not pretend I can do this alone because my brothers tried to take the choice from me. That was agreement enough. At the western controls, Miriam showed him the counterweight cage and the red release lever. When I pull this, the cage drops and lifts the spillway gate. It will rise too fast unless I reverse the wheel to check the chain. From where? The upper walk. Rowan studied the narrow platform above the shaft. Where do you need me? On the bridge. Sorrel must not reach this room before the river crests. The third center plank is rotten. Pull its peg, and the section will drop. Your way out? The west ladder. Mine? The inspection rail under the bridge. Keep your left shoulder against the upstream brace. He repeated the route exactly. They separated Wade and Orrin from the controls, unloaded Wade's revolver, and placed the cartridges in Miriam's apron. The forged map went into the ledger drawer. The transfer stayed against her body. By 11:30, the mill was ready. The wheel turned at half speed. The bell rope hung within reach. The counterweight was loaded with scrap iron. Rowan's rifle covered the eastern approach. Then the rain thinned. Without it hammering the roof, Miriam heard the upper river more clearly. Its roar had deepened into a continuous thunder. The dam was beginning to fail. Rowan stood at the east window. Lights. 6 lanterns appeared among the black pines beyond the bridge, moving toward the river in a measured line. Deke Sorrel had arrived. Miriam put one hand on the spillway lever. Rowan raised the rifle but waited for her direction. For the first time that night, she did not feel alone inside her own mill. "Let them reach the bridge," she said. Deke Sorrel reined in at the eastern end of the bridge and raised one gloved hand. "Miriam Vale," he called, "bring me the transfer, and you and the trapper may leave before the river takes this place." Rowan waited behind the loading door with his rifle ready. "Judge Bell never signed your papers," Miriam answered. 5 men spread behind him. Rowan glanced at Miriam. She nodded. Wade shouted from his post. "Deke, get me loose. We did what Crow asked." "You failed," Sorrel said. "You said we would be paid." "I said successful men would be paid." Wade went gray. "You mean to kill us too?" Oren ordered him silent, but panic had broken Wade's restraint. "They loosened the dam pins. They mean to wash away the mill, the papers, all of us." Sorrel drew. Rowan shot the lantern on the bridge rail. Darkness swallowed the eastern approach. "Now," Miriam said. Rowan pulled the peg beneath the 3rd center plank. The board dropped, pitching 2 gunmen through the opening. Their rifles fell into the river. A 3rd fired blindly. Rowan returned one measured round, striking his arm. Boots hit the western service path. Miriam ran for the upper walk. Then metal rang behind her. Oren stood free, a broken chain hanging from one wrist. He had hammered the flattened pin against stone until it sheared. He blocked the brake platform. "You always thought knowing the gears made you better than us." "No," Miriam said. "Staying did." He rushed her. She ducked and pulled the brake cord. The upper shoe slammed against the flywheel. The shaft lurched, and Oren's loose chain fell between 2 guide bars. Miriam threw her weight onto the secondary lever. The brake locked, drawing the chain across Oren's chest and pinning him to the frame. She set the safety dog into the ratchet. "Father chose me because I learned when to stop the machine." Below, Rowan moved beneath the bridge as bullets pierced the planks, then climbed back onto the deck. Sorrel appeared near the mill entrance, using his men as cover. He fired. The bullet struck Rowan high in the side. His rifle vanished through the gap. Miriam saw him fall. Upstream, timber cracked. The dam was failing. She released the brake and ran for the red spillway lever. Sorrel entered behind her, revolver aimed at her back. "Step away." Rowan tried to rise outside. Sorrel shifted his aim toward him. "Touch that lever, and he dies." Miriam studied the linked counterweight, drive chain, and bell rope beside him. She raised her hands. "Sensible at last," Sorrel said. "Rowan." His eyes lifted. Left shoulder against the upstream brace. He understood and threw himself sideways. Miriam pulled the red lever. The counterweight dropped. The spillway chain snapped tight, reversing the wheel half a turn. A drive line struck Sorrel's gun hand. His revolver flew away. Another loop caught his coat and dragged him through the service doorway. He seized the rail. Then the spillway gate opened. Black water burst into the western channel. Sorrel lost his grip and was swept into the diversion chute toward the empty ravine. The counterweight was falling too fast. Miriam climbed the upper walk and seized the manual brake. Her injured shoulder burned as the gate continued rising. Too high, and the chain would break. Too low, and the valley would flood. Rowan reached the ratchet, one hand pressed to his wound. "Tell me." Reverse pawl, 2 teeth. He drove it backward. 1. Again. He forced it another tooth. The counterweight stopped. Then the main surge struck. Water hammered the pilings and poured through the spillway. The building twisted, but the central supports held. Miriam seized the repaired bell rope and pulled. The bronze bell rang again and again, its warning rolling down Red Elk Gorge. Sorrel's remaining men fled as water climbed over the bridge rails. She pulled until lanterns moved among the distant homes. When the surge eased, she found Rowan against the upstream brace, pale and bleeding. "May I?" A faint laugh escaped him. You remembered. She pressed both hands over the wound. Stay with me. His eyes opened. The valley. Answering lanterns moved toward higher ground. Still there, she said. His hand closed over her wrist. So are you. So are we. By dawn, the river had fallen below the bridge deck. Marshal Nolan Price arrived with Judge Bell, a doctor, and residents of Mercy Ford. They found Wade tied to his post, Orrin pinned in the brake frame, and abandoned Blackstone horses on the eastern bank. Miriam gave Price the transfer pages, forged map, and false seal. Judge Bell studied the signature. That is not my hand. Wade began talking before anyone questioned him. He named Lucian Crowe, Deke Sorrell, and the clerk who prepared the papers. Price arrested both brothers for coercion, forgery, sabotage, and attempted murder. The evidence went to the territorial court, and Blackstone's work at Red Elk Gorge was suspended. Then the townspeople crossed the damaged bridge. Many had doubted Thomas Vale's decision to leave the mill to Miriam. Now they saw the open spillway and their homes still standing below it. Hannah Cole took Miriam's bandaged hands. You saved every roof in the lower valley. Miriam looked toward Rowan while the doctor stitched his side. We saved them. 3 days later, Rowan stood beside his mule at the western trail. His wound was bound and his pack secured. Behind him, neighbors were bracing the mill. Miriam approached with the bent iron hook from the flood bell. You should not be climbing into the high country yet. I have traveled in worse condition. That does not make it wise. She did not ask him to repay a debt or offer him any part of what she had defended. The bell needs to be hung straight, she said. It takes 2 people. For how long? For as long as the work is honest. Rowan unfastened his pack and set it down. Together they climbed the roof ladder. Miriam steadied the bracket while he drove the final pin through the repaired hook. When they descended, he placed his hand beside hers on the new rope. They pulled once. The bell's clear voice crossed the gorge in the morning sun. This time it carried no terror and asked no stranger to come running. It sounded over a mill that remained Miriam's, a valley still alive, and 2 people who had chosen, without promise or possession, to stay long enough to begin again.